Welcome to another edition of How to Build Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing. I'm Rod Khleif, and I'm absolutely thrilled you're here. And I know you're going to get incredible value from the gentleman we're interviewing today. His name is Darin Garman, and Darin has done over $800 million worth of apartment and investment property acquisitions in his career. But what's very interesting is he started out as a prison guard of all things. Now he's raised over $70 million for deals. He's been a founding member of a bank. He's written numerous books, and I could go on, and I will do him injustice, so I'm going to stop there. But we're going to really dig in. Darin, how are you, my friend?
Rod, I'm doing great. Thanks a lot. I'm really looking forward to talking with you today.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. So, prison guard, holy cow! So, what a fascinating start. So you started there. Talk about how you got into this business, and you've done so much. So please enlighten us.
Well, yeah, probably the number one thing on most people's list to start out something is not, well, let's be a prison guard, number one, right? And then go from there.
Right.
So I graduated from college with a degree in criminology, and I thought I was going to tackle the law enforcement field, just like those CIA, FBI shows you see on TV. That's what I thought I was going to be. And after I graduated, the first job I could really land was working at a prison. And worked as the prison guard there for a couple of years and found out that, you know what, maybe this criminology Department of Corrections thing isn't really for me like I thought it would be. And so I had an instance where while I was working there and having these thoughts of maybe I need to do something else, real estate was on my mind as one of those things. But I had no training, no background in it at all. So what finally happened, Rod, was I was summoned to the warden's office regarding an incident in the prison. And there on the bookshelf while I'm waiting to talk to the warden was a book that most people are probably familiar with called Think and Grow Rich. So I picked up the book. I started reading it. I actually took the book home from the prison. And after reading that book and having those thoughts of doing something else with my life, I decided to jump out of the prison guard, Department of Corrections job and jump into the real estate business.
Love it. I love it. Now, I will tell you about that book. I've given away now, I'm not exaggerating, 1,500 copies at least of that book. And it's one of those books that you don't just read once. You frankly should read it yearly. And I instruct my coaching students to read it yearly. So what year was that you had that epiphany?
That would have been I'd say 91, 92.
Okay. Yeah. Fantastic. So talk about how what was, how'd you get started? What did you do first? And then, I mean, I've already talked about the end game here, which is 800 million. Holy cow. That's a lot of property.
Right.
So what was the first thing you did?
Well, when I jumped into the real estate business, I decided to get into real estate sales first to at least get an understanding with what's going on out there, and that would basically be step one. So when I got my real estate license and got into sales, Rod, I noticed that there were not very many people working on multifamily properties. Most real estate agents out there are working on residential, but none, I guess I shouldn't say none, but not very many really focus on multifamily.
Right.
So honestly, it wasn't some kind of strategy I had or some epiphany I had. I just started working on multifamily properties because I thought that would be an opportunity. You fast forward to today, and so basically any apartment or multifamily property, 40 units on up, I'd say at least in the eastern half of Iowa, which is where I live, I will usually get at least a phone call, an email, or something from an owner saying, hey, we're interested in buying or interested in selling. And of course, that's where I step in and either entertain putting something together, whether we purchase the property or we still have our brokerage hat on and we sell the property for them too.
Okay. So you're still a broker as well. Wow. Okay. So Darin, how did you create that kind of an infrastructure where you are the go-to guy for anything on the eastern half of Iowa?
Well, part of it has to do with, and I think this can be information that's just great for your listeners because anybody can do this.
Right.
Part of it has to do with keeping in front of those multifamily owners, especially those owners of properties that you think you would want to own at some point in time.
Right.
So my team and I would spend considerable amounts of time, effort, and energy, especially on a monthly basis, staying in front of these owners, letting them know that, hey, if and when the time comes up and you have an interest in selling this property, please let us be at least your first contact. So you can at least.
So you would actually have meetings with them. It wasn't just mailing campaigns, phone calls. Was it all the above?
It was all the above, and of course,
Okay.
the goal at some point in time is to get to that meeting with with the multifamily owners. But it really came down to having a strategy where we consistently communicated with these multifamily owners, letting them know we're interested. We'd
Right.
love to own your would love to own your property if and when that time were to come up.
Right. Now you're also a broker. You still have a brokerage. So if you don't buy it, you can at least list it, and it's still so you've got both options, correct?
Right. That's exactly right.
Awesome. Now I know you also syndicate. You bring in investors and you syndicate your deals. And is there a particular size range that you like?
Yeah, my minimum size there is 72 units on up.
Okay.
And depending on where listeners are at, they may think 72 units is gigantic, or they may think, well, is that it? That's as small as you go. But what I found is, in terms of being able to have a project that gives the kind of benefits that you're really looking for, the economies of scale for us, in our estimation, really has to be in that 70 unit range.
I couldn't agree more. So when you have 70 units, you can have a complete on-site infrastructure. You can have a full-time maintenance man, full-time property manager / leasing agent, and you can effectively bring in third-party management. Now, do you manage your own properties, or do you utilize third-party managers?
We do manage our own properties. Yes.
You manage yourself. Okay. Now, is your territory is the wrong word. What are you just in Iowa? Is that totally your total focus, or are you in other markets?
It is our total focus, Rod. And
wow.
A lot of people will tell. I have the critics say, well, Darin, you kind of paint yourself in a corner, having all of your holdings, but. Yeah, I tend to want to be really familiar with the market, and especially what we get into. So
no question, guys. Those of you listening, you must become an expert in your market. And Darin, you're an extreme example of that, which is a good thing. If you don't understand the market, you don't know what's going on there. You haven't built the connections there. You're bound to make mistakes, and mistakes in this business can be fatal if they're large enough. So, no, I completely agree with your mindset. Some of the most successful operators I've had on the show are in one city, or they're in one submarket. As an aside, my stepdad's from Des Moines, so
oh, he is.
Yeah. So I'm vaguely familiar with it. I've been there a few times with him to see his family, but talk about, when, you have all these deals come across your desk because you've built up this incredible funnel, you've got these deals coming in the top of the funnel, and then you decide what to do with them. What sorts of what sorts of criteria do you look for? How, talk about the, maybe you can give us the first blush look that you give on a property when you get an offering memorandum and you get some financials and the rent roll and the trailing 12. What can you walk us through, because you've probably looked at hundreds of deals. Walk us through what you look at first before you decide to dig deeper, if that's possible.
No, that's a great question. And okay. The answer may or may not be surprising to you, Rod. It is resale. So the first thing that I look at is this the kind of property, based on at least the information I have at this point, mm-hmm. is this the kind of property where we would have a realistic opportunity to do very well from an investment standpoint on resale. So the first thing.
So you look at the exit strategy. That's the first thing you look at.
That's right.
Wow. Okay.
That's right.
Is it just the numbers, or are you looking at other factors as well?
Well, it part of it is the numbers. That's actually the second thing that we really focus on is then the numbers.
Okay.
But the exit strategy, and it isn't so much, Rod, where we put down a detailed exit strategy for a particular property, but based on the information that we get, at least on the surface, is this the kind of property based on initial location, based on initial numbers, based on what we know about the market? Is this the kind of property that can provide us a successful resale? And many times the answer is no.
Right. Usually in this market, it's no a lot. We're kissing lots of frogs today.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And so that's really kind of our first litmus test is, do we have an opportunity to do well on a resale of this property just based on the surface information? And
so when you're, I'm sorry, I interrupted. When you're an expert in a market, you know what the market rents are. So you can instantly see if there's something there. Correct?
Exactly. And that's actually number two. Then once it's the first answer is, yeah, we really think this could have good realistic resale 5-10 years down the road. Then it's okay. What do the numbers look like? And realistically, and emphasize that word realistically, where can we manipulate those numbers in the future? By manipulation, I simply mean, do we have the ability to realistically raise the rents on these apartments? And do we realistically have the ability to work on reducing the expenses?
Right.
And that might be a little oversimplification, but
no, it is. But let's dig in a little bit. Okay. Now on the rents, that's kind of obvious. You're gonna know the market, number one, but then you're gonna mystery shop the competition, and make sure it's apples to apples that you're competing with for this particular property, and then you back into the returns that you need, I assume. Yes.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Now, as far as reducing expenses, give some examples of some of the things that you've done there. Have you ever instituted RUBS or done any, big dramatic things?
Well, I'll give you a real example of what we've done, and this was a recent project. So this was a 100-unit property that went through our litmus test, and one of the things that we noticed was. And we find this with long-term owners, especially long-term out-of-state owners. We find this to be the case. Mm-hmm. The property taxes on this particular property, Rod, were over $140,000 a year. Okay.
Wow. So, 100 units. Good.
Yeah.
Lord.
Yeah. And so I noticed right away that is obviously much, much too high.
Right.
We went through a process of talking to the assessor's office and going through a process of getting that lowered. We were successful in doing that, and we got that property taxes lowered to just a little bit over $80,000 a year.
Wow, okay. That's huge, and that's direct to the NOI. That's awesome.
Right. That's right. And so now, that's kind of an extreme example, and it's a little bit more extreme because of the size of the property. But we'll first look at the expenses that we'll look at the largest expense, which is usually taxes. Then we'll take insurance, and we'll go line by line and see if we can make any improvements. Hopefully, Rod, we don't have to institute a RUBS program. Hopefully, we don't have to do some of those things to get the project where we think it could be. But in some cases, we will if we think that merits the cost and the time.
Well, that one line item. At a 6 cap was $1 million increase in value. Just that one move. So that's very impressive.
I can tell you that we ended up having to have that property appraised a year later for a refinance, and it did appraise for a little bit over $1 million.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Yeah. Fantastic. So you go line by line. You look for anomalies. You look for unusual things, and then. So then that's at that point, you start to dig deeper, and it starts to, how long does it take you to do an initial review of an offering memorandum to make a decision if you're going to go deeper?
It depends on how interesting it is.
Right.
You know,
How much
so
information you have is
that's right. It could literally be maybe 2 or 3 hours up to
right.
2 or 3 weeks.
Right. Okay. All right. Fair enough.
And one thing I want to mention that I think is super important for investors is make sure when you're looking at these memorandums, you don't just look on the surface and base your decisions based on what you see on the surface, because just like the example I gave, if we just looked on the surface,
Right.
the property was pretty average.
Right.
But if you look under the surface and do spend the necessary time on that due diligence, you can find some gems sometimes. You really can.
No kidding. Yeah, no, that's a great example. Great example. So let's talk about due diligence. Okay, so you make a decision. You're going to throw in an LOI or go straight to contract, and you're under contract. Talk about your due diligence process and the things that investors need to know as they're doing, the financial due diligence, the paperwork on site, and even the inspections. Can you speak to some of those things a little bit?
Sure. In terms of the inspections, I might be a little bit old school, but I do all of the inspections myself. Now, what I mean by that is I don't get my inspection clothes on and my flashlight out and start looking at things, but I accompany our maintenance team, which could be 1 or 2 people, to go through these properties myself.
That's critical. Yeah, I wouldn't do it any other way either. That's good. Good.
Yeah, I just think you have to. And so that's number one. Number two is if we find something during the physical inspection that we think is an issue, if it isn't, it's going to be unsurmountable in terms of cost or something that we think it just isn't, we're just not going to be able to get around, then we just move on.
Right.
But if it's something that we think we can deal with and work with, and the current owner with, we'll of course bring that up and negotiate.
Try to retrade if you have to. You want to avoid that, I guess, probably as much as you can, but sometimes you have to. And
yeah, sometimes you're right. We do try to avoid that as much as we can, but part of the reason I like to do the inspections myself and go with the maintenance folks is, there'll be a surprise you'll uncover once in a while.
Sure. And you go through every unit, and we in my training, I tell people, bring a camera, bring a video, take a picture of the unit number, and then, video the entire process, because who knows when you'll be in that unit again. And for that reason, and you really have to take your time with it. And it's exhausting, but it's critical. Would you agree?
Oh, no doubt about it. And sometimes it's easy to maybe pass that responsibility on to somebody else, whether maybe it is an inspector, but I really believe you've got to look at the property yourself. Agreed.
Now let's talk about the financial due diligence, what you might do on site, and anything else you can add, that comes to top of mind that might add value to my listeners.
Sure. I guess the word, it's kind of the C word, and the C word is confirmation, right? So I want to confirm the expenses that I'm looking at, that I've been provided, are really what the expenses are. So that confirmation process actually takes longer sometimes than the inspection process does.
Right.
But we confirm all of those expenses. And not surprisingly, when investors are selling a property, sometimes those figures are a little optimistic.
Some expenses get missed. It's just the craziest thing. How some expenses don't end up on the P&L. It's just
yeah. So there's a little bit of optimism and maybe some forgetfulness there once in a while. And so we really spend a lot of time on confirming those numbers, especially those expense items, and making sure that what we've been presented is pretty much what's going on. And then also, of course, like I said, at the same time, in the back of our minds, we're wondering, can we make any improvements to these expenses as well?
Okay.
And then in addition to that, I'd be remiss not to mention this, we look over all of the lease agreements as well.
Right. And what are you looking for?
We're mainly looking for just confirmation on really 2 things: rental amount, really 3 actually: rental amount, rental deposit, okay, and then also any information on longevity with residents, okay. So Not surprisingly, the longer residents are at a specific apartment complex, usually the lower their rent is, compared to where the market should be. And so we want to take a look at longevity too, as well as confirming what those rents are and what those deposit amounts are.
Sure. And one thing I might add, guys, take a look at lease expiration dates, and you want to see if you've got a bunch of them expiring at the same time, because that can be really dangerous. And, you know, one of the strategies you can utilize to minimize that is, as you lease new units, you make sure that they don't fall in that same time frame. And you know, we've been known to do 14-month leases, 16-month leases, 18-month leases, just to stagger those lease expirations. And you know, one other thing, yeah, I'm sure you look for as well, Darin, is concessions. If they've made concessions and things like that, you know, to be able to fill those units. And the other last piece is, I always like to see every version of the lease as well. I mean, you really should look at every lease, but you know, people owners, as they experience speed bumps in their management cycle or management process, will sometimes add clauses, change clauses based on experiences that they've had, and you want to make sure that you're aware of all those different pieces. So let me ask you this: in your career, I mean, obviously you've had some great ups, but you've also gotten your nose bloody. Talk about a time when you really got your butt kicked on a deal and what happened.
Oh, I mean, great question. It really was because of an ego situation. So, you know, after you do you get involved in enough of these deals, you tend to think, especially if they're successful, you tend to think you're pretty smart. You tend to think you're pretty good at this thing. And so myself and actually another partner of mine, just the two of us, we're feeling pretty good about what we'd accomplished. And we decided to purchase a 60-unit property in the worst area of town with a tenant mix that was, let's just say, a little scary. Okay. And so, but look, we're really smart guys.
You're so good, you can do anything. Oh my God, this is like deja vu for me. Just so you know. we can change. Look, it doesn't matter where it's located. The price we're paying for this property, this is a great deal for us. We're just gonna make a ton of money. Well, after 2 large insurance claims in 1 year, the only company we could find to insure us was Lloyd's of London. Wow.
Okay? And so our insurance ended up costing more than our property taxes. It was the biggest line item expense. We hadn't even owned this property a year.
Wow.
And that's really where we found out that even if you're 100% occupied, that doesn't mean 100% of your tenants are paying rent, Rod.
Oh, no.
So
big difference between actual occupancy and economic occupancy.
Oh man.
So you discovered that you got the memo on that. Listen, I got to tell you, same thing happened to me. I thought I was a real estate god, and I bought in a market. I won't dog the market because I do it publicly too often, but I got into this market I should have never gotten into, and same thing, same. I mean, I thought I could handle any tough market because I'm great at this.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for being open and honest about that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, you know, what do you think well, first of all, what's your favorite part of this business? What do you love about what it is you do?
I love the challenge of getting up every day and working on increasing our property's value and income, and just making it better. Just working on, and I guess I would call it the business, you know, making the business better and the challenges that go along with that. Because I mean, you know this, and all the listeners know this. This is the ultimate people business, right? And so it's
a team sport.
There's so many challenges that go along with that, and to get up every morning and have that challenge to make it better every day is really what I look forward to.
No, I love it. And I love the fact that you reference working on the business, because we get so caught up working in the business that we forget that we need to focus on the systems. We need to improve what it is we do. And every business is nothing but people and systems. And, I'm in the midst of that right now with this, with my thought leadership business. It's just grown into this incredible thing. And, courses and coaching and live events, sold out live events. And it's just, I've been working in it. Now I've hired help and I brought on a C-level team and we're got to work on the business. And so let me ask you this, what's the most challenging part of what it is you do?
Well, it really, it's really the flip side of what I just mentioned, right? Making it as good as you possibly can, because let's face it, we all have those days where you're scratching your head and you're wondering, what the heck did I get myself into here? This isn't supposed to go this way today, and it's not supposed to go this direction today. And then especially if you have multiple days like that in a row, you start thinking, oh my goodness. And so it oddly enough, it's really the exact opposite of what we just talked about. It is.
No, good answer.
Dealing with those daily challenges and meeting them head on, even in the face of adversity, because that adversity is always going to be there.
No question. No question. It doesn't go away. The only time it's gone is when you're gone. What words of wisdom would you share with, I have a lot of listeners that want to get into this business. They're aspiring real estate investors. Maybe they've done some single family homes, maybe a duplex. They know they want to go bigger. They see, they hear people that I interview on this show and get inspired by that. What words of wisdom would you share with someone like that?
This at first is probably going to sound a little oversimplistic, but I think it's very powerful. And that is, make sure you take action and do it.
Thank you.
Because I think, you can listen to as many podcasts as you want, read as many books, attend as many seminars, and feel that you've got to do all these things to get ready. But none of that does you any good until you actually take action, stick your neck out there a little bit, and go for it. That's the only way you can really start seeing the results that you're looking for.
You've got to do it. Yeah, you've got to do it. And I have an event that's almost sold out in Atlanta coming up here in a couple of weeks, and and one of the things I focus on at my events is mindset, because, the sad reality is a lot of people will come to those and they'll never do anything with it. So I focus a lot on pushing through the fear, getting uncomfortable, taking action, deciding what it is you really want and why you want it. And, and it really resonates with people, and they actually do take action. I've got a wall behind me here with hundreds of thank you cards from people that have bought, properties and that were inspired or pushed and motivated and pushed themselves to be uncomfortable, because the life you want is on the other side of that comfort. And so I do spend a lot of time on that, because I think it's 80 to 90% of your success in anything. It's mindset. It's actually taking action and doing it. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And, we get a lot of investors that contact us and they say things like, I've been thinking about doing this now for 2 years, or I've been getting this information for 3 years, and I say, well, let's go. Let's get going here.
Just do it. Like Nike says, just do it.
Yeah.
What's the best advice you've ever received around this business? And I know I didn't prepare you for any of these questions, so sorry to dump them on you here, but, what's the best advice you think you've ever gotten?
A lot of times when you get advice from it probably doesn't even really matter. Even maybe a mentor. Mm-hmm. Sometimes in the back of your mind, you think, oh yeah, sure. Or you probably, you really kind of discount some of that because you don't really think it applies to you.
Right.
A long time ago, a gentleman that I really thought highly of was kind of helping me through some things with some real estate projects that we were working on at the time. And he said, just remember that things always take longer. The time always takes longer. The effort and the energy always takes longer in getting the success that you want than you think it should. Okay. It always does more than you think it should. So hang in there, and what you're looking for, you'll ultimately get. And of course, at the time I'm thinking, okay, sure, whatever. But man, he was right. He was right. So if there's one thing I would say is that it just, a lot of times these things, especially, and the great thing about investment real estate is anybody can be successful at it. Anybody can. And so you don't have to have any kind of background to be a
You
success.
can even be a prison guard, be successful.
Exactly. Yeah. So, though I wouldn't recommend going that route, you could.
Right.
Yeah,
No,
but
I couldn't agree more. There is no archetype for this business, and I talk about different archetypes and different personality types. You know how there's the introvert, there's the extrovert, there's the super analytical, there's the more outgoing, and this business does require both. It requires you to look at the numbers. It's an empirical business. But back to your point about your mentor telling you that, I tell my coaching students to get frustrated. God's delays are not God's denials. You just
right.
you keep plugging forward, and it'll happen. The more you study this business, the more you evaluate deals, the more relationships you make. Repetition really is the mother of skill. You get a sense. I mean, you can smell a deal at this point now, Darin. I mean, you've done
That's
it
right.
so much, and that's the point you want to get to. Now, let me ask you this. What do you think is the number one reason people fail in this business? Because there are failures. I mean, they're not as prevalent because the banks, spend a lot of time really analyzing a deal before they'll loan on it. But what do you think the number one reason is?
Well, I think it's maybe a combination of really two things. One is unrealistic expectations on, again, what it will take to reach those goals that they've set for themselves. Okay.
Yep.
And I think that's part of it. And then because we all like to make New Year's resolutions, I guess.
Sure.
So when we sit down and decide we want to be multifamily investors or single family investors, we have an idea and a map laid out. And for many people, if it doesn't go according to plan, that's where the discouragement comes. That's where, maybe the mind starts to wander a little bit, and pretty soon they're on to something else.
Right. No, they give up. There's like a book called 3 Feet from the Gold. They give up. They've spent all that time on it, and they give up before they don't realize that the setbacks and the failures are part of the process. You fail your way to success. If people listen to my podcast, I call them seminars, but because they all are learning experience. The only time they're a failure is if you don't learn and you fail to grow, and they stop you. So, is there a quote that you have on your wall or something that inspires you? And if not, what does inspire you to I mean, you're a huge success. What's pushed you to continue driving?
I won't say it I won't say the quote as it reads, but I'll kind of paraphrase it.
Great.
Make epic things happen.
I love it.
Make epic things happen. And so by seeing that every day, it's a really good motivator for me. Especially when it comes to not only doing the best we can for our business, but also, I mean, we deal with tenants every day, and we want to make the best situation for them. We want them to have the best place to live and have the best living experience they can too. So,
right.
It's really make epic, things happen. And that's really a quote that I look at every day.
Now, this isn't a question that I've asked very often, but we all have funny experiences from this business that have happened to us. I've got hilarious ones that just mind blowing sometimes. Tell me about something funny that happened. Maybe a tenant experience, or just a wow, I can't believe that actually happened. That should have been on a TV show. It was so crazy.
Well, I'll give you an experience where. We owned an apartment property, and next door there was a single family home that was in foreclosure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we decided, since it was right next door to our apartment property, that we would go ahead and look at buying that, and
sure.
maybe doing something with it, building another building. So we looked, especially since it was in foreclosure.
Right.
So I contacted the owner. Met with the owner, nice lady, and we agreed on a price for the property. She signed the offer, but there's one caveat, and it was her husband, who was a truck driver. Okay. So she said, well, my husband's coming back home tonight. He knows everything that's going on. As soon as he gets home, I'll have him sign this and you can come back and get the purchase agreement the next day. So I go back the next morning. I've got the purchase agreement. It looks like we're going to be ready to close. Now all we have to do is the title work in order to get this done. Well, between that day and the date of closing, Rod, this lady and her husband disappeared. We would call, we would stop by personally, we would do everything, and they basically disappeared. So now we're at a point where if we want the property, we have to go to a sheriff's sale and buy it at auction there if we want it, or buy it from the bank.
Right.
Okay? So we chose to attend the sheriff's sale. We bought the property at sheriff's sale. And so right after the sheriff's sale was done, on the courthouse steps, we had one of our maintenance and repair people there, and his name was Dave. And I said, Dave, go over to the property, walk around it, inside out, start making your list of things that you think we may need to do.
Sure. Do your make-ready list, right?
So about 25, 30 minutes later, I get a phone call from Dave. And he says, you got to get over here right away. What's going on? I can't talk to you on the phone. You got to get over here right now. I'm like, what in the world? So I get there and I zip over there. I pull up to the place and he's standing in the yard. He comes to the car and here's the story he tells me. He says, I was walking around the outside checking things out. I then decided to go inside and I looked in the window and I noticed all the furniture was in the house. Then, as I looked in the window, I noticed that there was a man laying on the couch. I knocked on the window. He said, thank goodness he was alive. I thought maybe he actually might not have been alive.
Right.
So he comes to, and I tell him who I am. And he says, what are you talking about? And he said, I told the man that we bought this property at sheriff's sale and we were here to look at the property. He said, this is my house. No one bought this at sheriff's sale. No one's coming into my house. Well, what happened, the punchline here is this gentleman did live in the house. He was a truck driver. I did speak with his wife, but he never knew his house was in foreclosure, didn't know any of it until we bought it at sheriff's sale and approached him at his home that day.
Wow. I had the exact same thing happen because I used to knock on doors back in the day when I bought, I've purchased 2,000 houses that I rented out. And that was one of the ways. I bought 500 in Denver, knocking on doors of people in foreclosure. I had the exact same thing happen where one spouse didn't know that we were in foreclosure. That's a riot. Well, listen, thank you for sharing your wisdom today, buddy. This has been a lot of fun. How do people get a hold of you? What's the best website that they can go to check you out? I know you've got a lot of books online, The Paranoid Banker. You've got 9-month investment. What's a good website that they can check you out?
Yeah, the most convenient place for them to go would be garmanblog.com. And it's not spelled like the GPS system. It's GARMAN blog.com. So garmanblog.com.
We'll put that in the show notes as well. Darin, thanks so much for being on the show, buddy. It's been a lot of fun.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You bet.
Thank you for listening to the Lifetime Cash Flow Through Real Estate Investing podcast. If you've enjoyed the show, please take a minute to visit iTunes and leave your comments. For more resources or to connect with us further, please visit our website at rodkhleif.com. Tune in next week for our next show.